Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a world of whispered ambitions and delicate artistry. A place where beauty and intellect intertwined in a desperate quest for favor. We're talking about the imperial harem of ancient China, specifically about how concubines often turned to the subtle, profound power of poetry to capture the emperor's attention. Imagine yourself a young woman, plucked from your family, placed into a palace teeming with rivals, all vying for the affection of one man. You possess beauty, grace, perhaps musical talent, but what if your true weapon lies in a perfectly penned couplet, a subtly crafted verse that speaks directly to the emperor's heart or mind? It's less about direct competition and more about a delicate dance of words, like a very high-stakes literary essay. Lawn where your life's trajectory could hinge on a single metaphor. You probably wouldn't survive this, by the way, if your metaphors were rusty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what IME it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy history tales travel across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our first glimpse into this intricate world reveals poetic ambition, concubine's secret weapon. You see, in the vast imperial harem, sheer numbers meant that standing out was incredibly difficult. Beauty was common, musical talent abundant. To truly distinguish oneself, to forge a genuine connection with the emperor, who was, after all, a highly educated and often artistically inclined ruler, a conc. Yubain needed something more. Poetry offered that unique avenue. It allowed for intellectual engagement, emotional expression, and a display of refined cultivation that transcended mere physical allure. A well-crafted poem could hint at intelligence, sensitivity, and shared cultural understanding, creating a bond far deeper than superficial charm. Imagine the quiet, solitary hours spent meticulous. Why crafting each line, each character, knowing it could be your only chance to truly be seen. One mainstream historical fact is the centrality of poetry in Chinese intellectual and courtly life throughout most dynasties. From the Tang and Song dynasties, widely considered golden ages of Qin's poetry, to subsequent eras, emperors, scholars, and cultured individuals engaged in poetic composition as a primary form of intellectual discourse, entertainment, and personal expression. This social emphasis meant that a concubine skilled in verse would naturally garner respect and attention. You can almost hear the soft brush strokes on silk, the quiet contemplation in hushed chambers, as the verses were brought to life. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might deliberately craft a poem with a subtly obscure classical allusion that only the emperor, with his superior scholarly background, would truly grasp. This wasn't just to show off her knowledge, but to create a private intellectual, inside joke, or a shared moment of recognition that excluded others in the harem, fostering a unique bond. Imagine trying to impress your boss by dropping a Shakespearean sonnet with a perfectly placed, subtle pun that only they would get. What a truly cunning form of intellectual flirtation. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on poetic talent among concubines was primarily a genuine appreciation for artistic merit by emperors, reflecting the high cultural standards of the court, or if it was also a strategic tool for concubines to navigate the intensely competitive and often emotionally barren environment of the harem, offering a safer, more intellectual pathway to influence than overt beauty or political maneuvering. Was it about art or strategy? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of a poem, carried on a breeze through the palace courtyards, its meaning resonating long after the words are spoken. You feel the quiet ambition, the subtle power held within delicate verse. From the subtle power of poetic ambition, our journey now leads us deeper into the gilded, yet often isolating, world of the imperial harem, a gilded cage. You might imagine a place of endless luxury and leisure, filled with beautiful women. But for the vast majority of concubines, the harem was a world of intense competition, strict hierarchy, and profound confinement. Imagine yourself one of hundreds, or even thousands of women, each with her own hopes and fears, all living under the same roof, their lives entirely dictated by the distant whims of one man. It was less about opulent living and more about a psychological battleground, a lavish prison where the currency was imperial favor and the stakes were your very existence. The forbidden city's inner court, where the emperor, empress, and all his consorts and concubines resided, was a complex, self-contained universe. These women were cut off from their families, their former lives, and the outside world. Their days were structured by rigid protocols, defined by their rank within the intricate harem hierarchy, while the top-ranking empress and imperial noble consorts enjoyed considerable prestige and comfort. Those lower down the ladder lived lives of quiet anonymity, their chances of ever truly encountering the emperor slim to none. This created an environment Here every small advantage, every opportunity to stand out, was fiercely coveted. You can almost feel the stifling atmosphere, the endless waiting, the quiet despair of dreams deferred, all hidden bay behind walls of crimson and gold. One mainstream historical fact is the sheer size and stratified nature of the imperial harem across various dynasties. Emperors often had hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of women in their harems, organized into strict ranks with specific titles, privileges, and stipends. This vast number meant that only a tiny fraction would ever truly capture the emperor's lasting attention, making the competition for favor incredibly intense. You can almost hear the soft rustle of silk as women navigate the intricate pathways of the palace, each aware of her precise position in the unseen pecking order. Now for a quirky tidbit: sometimes, to manage the overwhelming number of concubines, lower-ranking women would be rotated through various palace duties, performing tasks that had little to do with direct service to the emperor, just to keep them occupied. Imagine being a concubine, dreaming of imperial affection, only to spend your days meticulously arranging flowers or polishing bronze artifacts in a distant hall. What a truly unglamorous reality for a woman of the imperial harem. Historians still argue whether the vastness and rigid hierarchy of the imperial harem was primarily a practical administrative system designed to ensure imperial succession and maintain social order why accommodating daughters of powerful families, or if it was also a reflection of patriarchal power structures, reducing women to instruments of lineage and symbols of imperial virility. Was it about dynastic stability or systemic dehumanization? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of the wind through the palace eaves, carrying the unspoken hopes and silent frustrations of 1,000 hidden lives. You feel the profound isolation, the immense pressure, within what appeared to be a world of ultimate luxury. From the gilded cage of the imperial harem, our focus now shifts to the meticulous preparation required to even enter that poetic arena: education and refinement, cultivating skill. You might imagine a concubine's days filled with idle gossip and luxurious pursuits. But for those with ambition, or simply a desire for survival and recognition, their time was rigorously dedicated to mastering a suite of refined arts, with poetry often at the forefront. Imagine yourself a young girl, perhaps barely a teenager, being trained not just in courtly manners and etiquette, but in the intricate brushstrokes of calligraphy, the delicate plucking of a zither, and the profound nuances of classical verse. It was less about innate talent and more about disciplined cultivation, like attending a very very demanding finishing school where your entire future depended on your mastery of ancient arts. The imperial court placed a high value on cultural literacy and artistic accomplishment. Emperors themselves were often accomplished poets, calligraphers, and musicians. Therefore, concubines who read to capture the emperor's attention needed to demonstrate not just beauty, but intellectual depth and cultivated taste. Their education typically included classical literature, history, music, painting, and especially the composition of poetry. Tutors, often eunuchs or older, respected palace women, would guide them through ancient texts, poetic forms, and the subtle art of conveying emotion in. He thought through verse. You can almost feel the quiet intensity of these lessons, the rustle of silk as a hand practiced a new character, the soft murmur of a memorized poem. One mainstream historical fact is the prominence of the four arts: qin, qi, shu, hua, zither, go, calligraphy, painting, as essential accomplishments for cultured individuals in ancient China. Poetry wasn't explicitly one of the four, it was intrinsically linked to calligraphy, the writing of poems, and often set to music, qin. Concubines were expected to demonstrate proficiency in these areas to be considered truly accomplished. You can almost hear the soft strumming of a zither, accompanying a recited poem, filling a quiet chamber with harmonious beauty. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, to ensure a concubine's poetic skill was genuine and not merely a result of rote memorization or the work of a ghostwriter, the emperor or a trusted eunuch might request an on-the-spot composition during an audience. Imagine being put on the spot, asked to spontaneously compose a perfect poem on a given topic, knowing your entire future could depend on whether you could rhyme dragon with flagon under immense pressure. What a truly nerve-wracking poetic pop quiz. Historians still argue whether the rigorous artistic education of concubines was primarily a genuine imperial desire for intellectual companionship and a reflection of societal values placing high importance on classical arts, or if it was also a form of social conditioning, ensuring that women within the harem conformed to specific ideals of feminine accomplishment, and served to reinforce their undefined roles. Was it about fostering intellect, or maintaining control? The debate continues, much like the delicate dance of a brush on paper, each stroke a testament to years of training, a silent plea for recognition in a world of whispers and hidden talents. You feel the immense dedication, the quiet pursuit of excellence, in hopes of catching a single, fleeting imperial glance. From the demanding curriculum of a concubine's education, we now delve into the very heart of their poetic expression, themes of longing, expressing devotion. You might imagine them writing about grand political events, or the intricacies of court life. But the most effective poems, the ones most likely to resonate with an emperor, often revolved around deeply personal, emotionally charged themes of yearning, loyalty, and the bittersweet ache of unfulfilled desire. Imagine crafting verses that speak of the emperor as a distant sun, a celestial being whose light you yearn for, or likening your solitude in the vast palace to a lone orchid awaiting its bloom. It was less about objective observations and more about a heartfelt, often subtle, plea for connection, like writing a very elegant, indirect love letter. Concubines understood that direct declarations of love might seem presumptuous, and overt political commentary was certainly forbidden. Instead, they employed a rich vocabulary of metaphors and classical allusions to convey their feelings. Themes frequently included the solitary beauty of nature, reflecting their own isolation, the passage of seasons, symbolizing their patience or fading youth, historical figures who gained favor through virtue or talent, and most importantly, their unwavering devotion and loyalty to the emperor, even in his absence. These poems were carefully constructed emotional landscapes, designed to evoke empathy and a sense of connection. You can almost feel the quiet intensity as a concubine pours her innermost feelings onto silk, each character a tiny piece of her heart. One mainstream historical fact is that boudoir poetry, tradition in Chinese literature. This genre, often written by women, or from a woman's perspective by male poets, focused on themes of loneliness, longing, and the sorrow of separation, particularly from a lover or husband. Concubines naturally drew upon and contributed to this rich tradition, adapting its conventions to unique circumstances within the imperial harem. You can almost hear the faint echo of ancient laments, woven into new verses for the emperor's ears. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine would deliberately leave a poem unfinished or with a subtle, unresolved question, hoping that the emperor, intrigued, would then seek her out to complete either verse or discuss its meaning. Imagine leaving a cliffhanger in your poem, specifically to get the emperor to call you. What a truly cunning form of literary bait-and-switch. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of longing and devotion as poetic themes among concubines was primarily a genuine expression of their personal emotional experiences within a restrictive environment, or if it was a highly formalized and strategic performance, a cultural script designed to fulfill imperial expectations and secure favor within the harem's competitive structure. Was it about raw emotion or calculated artistry? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of a breeze through an empty courtyard, carrying the echoes of unspoken desires and hopes expressed through the timeless art of verse. You feel the deep yearning, the profound loyalty, conveyed through the delicate power of words. From the poignant themes of longing and devotion, our journey now arrives at a critical juncture, imperial audience, the moment of truth. You might imagine a concubine simply handing her poem to a sing eunuch, hoping it finds its way to the emperor. But the presentation of such a delicate and potentially impactful creation was a highly ritualized, incredibly nerve-wracking affair, a fleeting opportunity that could make or break a woman's future in the harem. Imagine the years of training, the hours of careful composition, all culminating in a single, brief moment when your meticulously crafted verse is laid before the Son of Heaven. It was less about a casual delivery and more about a high-stakes performance, like a silent audition for your very destiny. The process for a concubine to present a poem to the emperor was rarely direct. Typically, the verse would be carefully transcribed onto a delicate piece of silk or fine paper, often accompanied by elegant calligraphy, which we'll touch on later. This precious item would then be entrusted to a trusted eunuch, who would be responsible for delivering it to the emperor at an opportune moment. This might be during a quiet evening when the emperor was relaxing in his private chambers, or perhaps during a scholarly gathering where he was receptive to artistic expressions. The eunuch's judgment and influence were crucial here, as a poorly timed or mishandled delivery could doom the poem, and the concubine's hopes, before it even reached the imperial eye. You can almost feel the butterflies in the stomach, the dry mouth, as a concubine hands over her labor of love, knowing it's now out of her hands. One mainstream historical fact is the central role of eunuchs as intermediaries between the emperor and the women of the harem. Given the strict segregation and security within the inner court, eunuchs served as the primary conduits for all communication, gifts, and requests. This made their favor almost as important as the emperor's, as they controlled access and filtered information, including poetic submissions. You can almost hear the soft, conspiratorial whispers between a concubine and a eunuch, negotiating the perfect moment for her art to shine. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, if an emperor was particularly fond of a specific concubine or had heard whispers of her poetic talent, he might deliberately request a poem from her. This was an extraordinary mark of favor, bypassing the usual protocol and giving her a direct, if still indirect, line to his attention. Imagine getting a special invitation to submit your work, knowing the emperor himself was anticipating your creation. What a truly thrilling, yet terrifying, validation of your artistic efforts. Historians still argue whether the formalized process of presenting poems to the emperor was primarily a necessary administrative procedure to manage the immense number of concubines and control access as to the ruler, or if it also served to heighten the emperor's mystique and create a sense of rarity and heightened value around his attention, making every glimpse of favor feel more profound. Was it about efficiency or engineered exclusivity? The debate continues, much like the gentle rustle of a silken scroll, as it passes from hand to hand, carrying hopes and dreams towards the imperial priests. Awaiting that one defining moment. You feel the immense pressure, the quiet anticipation, of a lifetime's ambition hanging on a single, fragile offering. From the nerve-wracking moment of imperial audience, our attention now turns to an equally crucial, yet often overlooked, aspect of poetic presentation: calligraphy's charm, visual poetry. You might imagine the emperor simply reading the words of a poem. But in ancient China, the aesthetic beauty of the handwriting itself was often considered as important as the literary content, elevating the poem from mere text to a work of art. Imagine a concubine spending hours, days, meticulously practicing each stroke, perfecting the flow and balance of every character, knowing that the visual presentation of her verse could capture the emperor's eye even before he read a single word. It was less about legibility and more about artistic expression, like a silent, visual symphony accompanying the melody of her words. Calligraphy was considered the highest form of art in imperial China, revered for its elegance, discipline, and the profound personal expression it allowed. An accomplished calligrapher demonstrated not only skill but also cultivation, inner harmony, and a refined intellect. For a concubine presenting a poem, her calligraphy was a direct reflection of her education and artistic sensibilities. A beautifully written poem, even if its content was perhaps not groundbreaking, could still impress the emperor and hint at a deeper level of refinement and dedication. It was a tangible manifestation of her inner world, laid bare before the imperial gaze. You can almost feel the gentle pressure of the brush, the smooth glide of ink on silk, as each character comes to life with grace and precision. One mainstream historical fact is the deep reverence for calligraphy masters throughout Chinese history, whose works were collected and treasured as national treasures. Emperors themselves often practiced calligraphy daily and were connoisseurs of the art, understanding its nuances and appreciating the subtle variations in style and technique. This meant that a concubine's calligraphic skill would be readily recognized and valued at the highest levels of court. You can almost hear the soft, almost meditative sound of brush on paper, a practice that transcended mere writing to become a spiritual discipline. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, concubines would use specially prepared scented inks when transcribing their poems. These inks, often infused with delicate floral or woody fragrances, were subtle enough not to be overpowering but distinct enough to leave a lingering, pleasant aroma on the paper, adding another layer of sensory appeal to their poetic offering. Imagine receiving a beautifully written poem that also carries the faint, enchanting scent of jasmine or sandalwood, making the experience even more memorable. What a truly multisensory approach to imperial courtship! Historians still argue whether the emphasis on calligraphy in presenting poems was primarily a genuine aesthetic appreciation, reflecting a deeply ingrained cultural value for visual artistry, or if it was also a strategic tool for concubines to demonstrate their meticulousness and refinement, distinguishing themselves in a highly competitive environment where outward displays of cultivation were paramount. Was it about art, or subtle maneuvering? The debate continues, much like the lingering scent of ink on an ancient scroll, a silent testament to the enduring power of visual beauty to convey unspoken messages and capture the discerning eye. You feel the profound dedication, the quiet artistry, held within each perfectly formed stroke. From the visual elegance of calligraphy, our journey now turns to the deeper language of poetic expression, symbolism in nature, hidden messages. You might imagine a concubine simply describing a flower or a bird. But in ancient Chinese poetry, natural imagery was rarely just about the literal object. It was a sophisticated shorthand for emotions, virtues, and unspoken desires, allowing concubines to convey profound messages without explicit declaration. Imagine gazing at a painting of a plum blossom in winter, knowing it represents resilience and purity, or seeing a lone wild goose flying so. Understanding it signifies longing for home or a distant lover. It was less about botanical accuracy and more about a universally understood code, like a secret language whispered through the rustling leaves and flowing rivers. The natural world provided an inexhaustible wellspring of symbolic meaning in Chinese culture. Concubines, adept in classical literature, would skillfully weave these symbols into their verses. A bam O stalk might represent uprightness and humility, enduring adversity with grace. A lotus flower, rising unsullied from muddy waters, symbolized purity and spiritual enlightenment. The moon often stood D for longing, separation, or the distant emperor himself. By employing these rich symbols, a concubine could express her loyalty, her loneliness, her aspirations, or even subtle criticisms, all cloaked in beautiful, seemingly innocuous natural descriptions. This allowed for layers of interpretation, appealing to the emperor's intellect and emotional sensitivity. You can almost feel the gentle breeze carrying the scent of blossoms, each petal a silent word, a hidden meaning. One mainstream historical fact is the Four Gentlemen. In Chinese art and literature, the plum blossom, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum. These plants were revered for their noble qualities and became deeply embedded symbols of virtue, resilience, and integrity. Concubines would frequently incorporate these specific symbols into their poetry to subtly express their own character or to praise the emperor's virtues through association. You can almost hear the soft rustle of silk as a poem describing a resilient bamboo grove is recited, its meaning clear to a discerning ear. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might even choose a specific flower or bird that was known to be a particular favorite of the emperor, and then compose a poem focusing on that symbol. This wasn't just to show shared taste, but to subtly hint at a deeper, personal connection, a shared appreciation that might make her stand out. Imagine trying to impress someone by writing a poem about their favorite obscure bird, hoping they notice your keen observation. What a truly personalized form of flattery! Historians still argue whether the extensive use of natural symbolism in concubines' poetry was primarily a genuine reflection of their philosophical and artistic connection to nature, characteristic of Chinese culture, or if it was a highly strategic rhetorical device, allowing them to express complex or even potentially dangerous sentiments in a safe, culturally acceptable, and aesthetically pleasing manner. Was it about artistic expression, or veiled communication? The debate continues, much like the quiet unfolding of a blossom, its beauty a testament to unseen forces, its symbolism a whisper of profound meaning. You feel the deep connection to the natural world, its quiet power to convey unspoken truths. From the rich symbolism woven into natural imagery, our journey now sheds light on the often unseen facilitators of these poetic ambitions. Eunuchs as messengers, secret delivery. You might imagine a concubine boldly approaching the emperor herself, scroll in hand. But the strict protocols of the inner court, enforced by countless layers of guards and the rigid hierarchy of the harem, made such direct contact impossible. Instead, the emperor's eunuchs, those ubiquitous, silent figures, became the vital conduits for these delicate poetic offerings. Imagine entrusting your most heartfelt verses, your deepest hopes, to a eunuch, knowing their discretion, loyalty, and influence could make all the difference in whether your words ever reached the imperial eye. It was less about a simple postal service and more about a high-stakes human relay, where the messenger held immense power. Eunuchs, having undergone castration, were deemed safe to serve within the inner court, as they posed no threat to the imperial lineage. This unique position gave them unparalleled access to both the emperor's private chambers and the women of the harem. They served as go-betweens for virtually all communication, from mundane household requests to the most personal messages. For a concubine, cultivating a good relationship with a trusted eunuch was paramount. These eunuchs would discreetly deliver poems, often at opportune moments when the emperor was receptive to such artistic overtures, and ensuring the message found its mark without drawing undue attention or jealousy from rivals. You can almost feel the hushed negotiations, the subtle exchange of favors, as a concubine seeks a eunuch's help to advance her cause. One mainstream historical fact is the immense power and influence that eunuchs accumulated in various Chinese dynasties, sometimes even eclipsing that of court officials. Their control over the inner court and their proximity to the emperor meant they could act as gatekeepers, advisors, and crucially, manipulators of information flow, including personal communications from the harem. You can almost hear the soft padding of their silk shoes as they glide through the corridors, carrying the weight of countless secrets and ambitions. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might include a small, valuable gift with her poem, subtly slipped to the eunuch responsible for its delivery. This wasn't a bribe in the crude sense, but a customary gesture of appreciation and a gentle nudge to ensure the eunuch was motivated to find the best moment for presentation. Imagine trying to get your important memo to the CEO, and realizing the best way is to discreetly include a very nice, very small box of chocolates for their assistant. What a truly timeless method of incentivizing good service. Historians still argue whether the reliance on eunuchs for delivering such sensitive personal communications, like poetry, was primarily a practical necessity arising from the strict segregation of East Imperial Court, or if it also fostered an environment of indirect communication and intrigue, where eunuchs could subtly influence the emperor's perception of the women and their poetic talents. Was it about security, or manipulation? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of a message, passing through unseen hands, its fate resting on the discretion and influence of a silent intern. Diary. You feel the subtle power dynamics, the quiet diplomacy, playing out in the shadowy corridors of the palace. From the discreet delivery by eunuchs, our nocturnal journey now confronts the darker side of poetic ambition, rivalries and sabotage, poetic peril. You might imagine the harem as a place where icy pursuits were peacefully shared. But in reality, the intense competition for the emperor's favor meant that a concubine's poetic success could easily ignite fierce jealousy, and even malicious scam. Yes, from her rivals. Imagine spending weeks perfecting a moving verse, only for it to be subtly altered, misplaced, or even deliberately replaced with something inferior by a jealous competitor. It was less about friendly competition and more about a psychological battlefield, where art became a weapon and betrayal a constant threat. The stakes in the harem were incredibly high. Imperial favor meant not just personal comfort and prestige, but also the potential for one's family to gain influence and wealth. A concubine who managed to capture the emperor's attention through her poetic talent could significantly elevate her status, which naturally posed a threat to those already in favored positions or those equally ambitious. His environment often led to subtle acts of sabotage. A rival might spread rumors about a concubine's lack of true talent, attempt to intercept her poetic submissions, or even try to subtly deface or alter her calligraphy. The palace walls, for all their grandeur, often contained a hidden world of quiet treachery. You can almost feel the chill in the air, the unspoken tension, as concubines watch each other with wary eyes, each success a potential trigger for another's animosity. One mainstream historical fact is the notorious history of infighting and intrigue within imperial harems across many dynasties. While not always directly related to poetry, concubines and empresses frequently engaged in elaborate power struggles, often using poison, false accusations, or manipulation of eunuchs and court officials to undermine rivals. The poetic arena was just one more stage for these silent, deadly battles. You can almost hear the soft, venomous whispers carried on the palace breeze, planning a rival's downfall. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a rival might subtly introduce imperfections or bad omens into a concubine's poem, such as including a character with an unlucky stroke order, or subtly changing a favorable symbol to an inauspicious one. The hope was that the emperor, upon reading the poem, would feel an inexplicable unease or misinterpret that bad luck as originating from the concubine herself. Imagine trying to get your poem noticed, only to have someone secretly add a tiny, almost invisible, bad luck charm into your masterpiece. What a truly insidious form of artistic sabotage. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of sabotage and rivalry within the harem particularly concerning artistic endeavors like poetry, was primarily a direct consequence of the intensely competitive and high-stakes environment, where every advantage counted, or if it also reflected a broader societal tendency towards intrigue and factionalism within imperial courts, with the harem merely being a microcosm of larger power struggles. Was it about personal ambition, or systemic rivalry? The debate continues, much like the gentle rustle of a doctored scroll, its hidden flaws whispering less of betrayal in the quiet of the night. You feel the constant vigilance required, the unspoken dangers lurking even amidst the most beautiful artistic expressions. From the shadows of rivalry and sabotage, our journey now turns to the rare, glittering moments of triumph, the emperor's response, a glimpse of favor. You might imagine a concubine's poem, if noticed, eliciting a grand, immediate reward. But often, the emperor's acknowledgement was subtle, a quiet nod, a thoughtful comment, or a small, carefully chosen gift, signals that were intensely scrutinized by everyone in the harem. Imagine the emperor, after reading your verse, perhaps simply requesting to see you, or sending a rare silk fan, and knowing that this seemingly minor gesture held immense power, elevating your status in the eyes of the entire court. It was less about overt praise and more about deciphering unspoken signals, like interpreting a single, precious smile in a crowded room. An emperor's positive response to a concubine's poem was a multifaceted signal. It indicated not only his appreciation for her artistic talent but also a potential inclination towards her personal charm and intelligence. This could lead to a coveted imperial audience, more frequent invitations to his bedchamber, an increase in her stipend, or even a subtle elevation in her rank within the harem hierarchy. The value of such a response lay not just in the material reward, but in the psychological impact. It boosted the concubine's confidence, deterred rivals, at least temporarily, and established her as a woman of distinction. You can almost feel the collective intake of breath in the harem when news of such favor spread, a mixture of envy and renewed ambition. One mainstream historical fact is the system of imperial gifts and promotions as a primary means for emperors to bestow favor upon their consorts and concubines. These gifts could range from precious jewels and fabrics to land grants or even titles, all serving to publicly acknowledge imperial affection and elevate the recipient's status within the palace and their family's standing. A poem was of the catalyst for such an bestowal. You can almost hear the soft clink of jade, the rustle of fine brocade, as a favored concubine receives her reward. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, instead of a direct gift, the emperor might subtly quote a line from the concubine's poem in a conversation or an imperial decree, especially if it touched upon a theme relevant to state affairs. This was an incredibly subtle, yet profoundly powerful, form of acknowledgement, showing not only that he read and appreciated her work but that it had genuinely resonated with him. Imagine having your boss quote your presentation in a company-wide memo, and knowing it came from a single, personal line you wrote. What a truly sophisticated form of imperial recognition. And historians still argue whether the emperor's acknowledgement of a concubine's poetic talent was primarily a genuine appreciation for artistic excellence, reflecting his personal taste and intellectual engagement, or if it was also a strategic act, a way to maintain competition and control within the harem by demonstrating that favor could be earned through merit beyond mere physical beauty. Was it about artistic taste or strategic management? The debate continues, much like the gentle rustle of a silken fan, a subtle movement that could signify a lifetime of hope realized, or a rival's silent despair, all stemming from a few well-chosen words. You feel the immense gravity of these subtle signals, the silent shifts in power within the gilded cage. From the subtle signs of imperial favor, our journey now uncovers the long history of concubines leveraging their artistic talents, specifically poetry, historical precedents, royal poets. You might imagine the idea of a concubine using poetry as a unique strategy to be a novel concept. But throughout Chinese history, there were numerous well-documented examples of royal women, including empresses. Zetian, not just figures of political power, but also accomplished poets whose verses were admired and even studied. It was less about isolated incidents and more about a rich, continuous tradition of female poetic achievement within the confines of the imperial court. The tradition of educated and artistically talented women within the imperial household dates back centuries. While their primary role was often to bear heirs, their intellectual and creative capability ties were also highly valued, particularly by emperors who themselves were scholars and poets. Concubines often drew inspiration from these historical examples, viewing their predecessors' success of poetry as a viable path to influence, and a way to elevate their status beyond mere physical attributes. The works of these royal poetesses sometimes even became part of the classical literary canon, studied by future generations of scholars and concubines alike. You can almost feel the weight of history, the quiet inspiration drawn from the verses of those who came before. One mainstream historical fact is the prominence of women poets in the Tang dynasty, an era often considered the zenith of Chinese poetry. While male poets dominated the formal literary scene, women from various social strata, including the court, contributed significantly to the poetic output. Figures like Shui Tao or Yu Xuanji, though perhaps not concubines in the strictest sense, the intellectual and artistic achievements of women in that period, influencing those within the harem. You can almost hear the melodious verses echoing through ancient halls, testament to a flourishing poetic tradition. Now for a quirky tidbit, some historical accounts suggest that certain emperors would even hold informal poetry contests within the harem, encouraging concubines to submit verses on specific themes. While ostensibly for entertainment, these contests were often unspoken opportunities for the emperor to discover new talents, or subtly promote a favored concubine whose work stood out. Imagine a kind of ancient, idle show, but with ink and brushes, where the grand prize was the emperor's fleeting attention. What a truly unique form of imperial talent show! Historians still argue whether the recognition and celebration of female poets within the imperial court was primarily a genuine appreciation for their artistic contributions, reflecting a more open-minded cultural attitude towards women's intellect in certain periods, or if it was also a way to cultivate and contain female talent within the controlled environment of the harem, channeling their urges into aesthetically pleasing, yet ultimately harmless, pursuits. Was it about artistic merit, or social management? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of an ancient verse carried beyond the winds of time, reminding us of the enduring power of words, even from within gilded cages. You feel the long lineage of female artistry, stretching back through centuries of imperial life. From the long lineage of royal poets, our journey now explores how their words often intertwined with another elegant art form, musicality of verse, lute and lyre. You might imagine a concubine simply reciting her poem, perhaps in a quiet, unadorned voice. But in ancient China, poetry and music were often inseparable, with verses frequently composed to be sung or accompanied by traditional instruments. Hence, imagine a concubine, her delicate fingers plucking the strings of a guqin, a 7-string zither, or a pipa, a 4-stringed lute, her voice softly chanting the lines of her poem, transforming it into a captivating performance. It was less about spoken words and more about a complete sensory experience, like a private concert where the melody amplified the emotional depth of the verse. Music was highly valued in the imperial court, considered a fundamental aspect of cultivation and a means to express profound emotions and philosophical ideas. Concubines who possessed musical talent had another powerful tool to distinguish themselves. Composing poetry that could be set to music, or performing existing verses with their own musical accompaniment, demonstrated an exceptional level of artistic skill and refinement. This added a layer of intimacy and beauty to their poetic offerings, making them even more memorable and impactful for the emperor, who was often a connoisseur of arts. You can almost feel the gentle vibrations of the strings, the harmonious blend of voice and instrument, filling the emperor's private chambers. One mainstream historical fact is the ancient and deep connection between poetry and music in China, evident in early collections like the Book of Songs, Shijing, where many poems were originally lyrics meant to be sung. This tradition continued throughout various dynasties, with poets often being musicians themselves, and musical academies playing a crucial role in courtly entertainment and ritual. You can almost hear the faint echoes of ancient melodies, carrying the words of forgotten verses through the centuries. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, if a concubine was particularly skilled, she might perform a poem she wrote with improvised musical accompaniment, adapting her melodies on the spot to match the changing emotions or rhythm of the verse. This was an incredibly advanced skill, showcasing not just memorization but true artistic spontaneity and a deep understanding of both forms. Imagine performing a jazz improvisation while reciting a sonnet, perfectly blending your words and music without missing a beat. What a truly impressive display of integrated talent! Historians still argue whether the combination of poetry and music by concubines was primarily a genuine artistic endeavor, reflecting a holistic approach to creative expression common in Chinese culture, or if it was a calculated strategy to increase their chances of gaining imperial favor by appealing to multiple senses and demonstrating multifaceted talent in a highly competitive environment. Is it about artistic purity or strategic performance? The debate continues, much like the lingering resonance of a plucked string, a silent testament to the enduring power of harmony, both in sound and in the pursuit of imperial recognition. You feel the subtle blend of arts, creating a tapestry of sound and meaning that aim directly for the emperor's heart. From the harmonious blend of poetry and music, our journey now explores how concubines used intellectual agility to embed deeper layers of meaning, hidden meanings, acrostics and puns. You might imagine the emperor simply appreciating the surface beauty of a poem. But often, the most clever and effective verses contain subtle, hidden messages, secret codes embedded within the words themselves, designed to reveal themselves only to a discerning eye, the emperor's. Imagine a concubine crafting a poem where the first character of each line, read vertically, spells out a secret phrase, or where a seemingly innocent word actually carries a double meaning only a highly educated mind would grasp. It was less about overt flattery and more about a sophisticated intellectual game, like a cryptic word puzzle where the prize was imperial favor. This use of hidden meanings was a testament to a concubine's deep understanding of classical Chinese, a language rich with homophones, multiple character meanings, and flexible grammatical structures that lent themselves perfectly to such clever wordplay. Acrostics, where initial letters or characters spell out a word or message, and puns, using words with double meanings, were common techniques. These subtle layers allowed concubines to express daring sentiments, personal pleas, or even intimate thoughts that would be too audacious to state directly. Discovering such a hidden message would not only impress the emperor with the concubine's intellect but also create a unique, private bond, a shared secret between ruler and poet. You can almost feel the quiet thrill of discovery, the sudden flash of insight, as the emperor deciphers a hidden message meant only for him. One mainstream historical fact is the long tradition of wordplay and literary games within Chinese scholarship and poetry. Scholars and literati frequently engaged in crafting intricate puzzles, and double entendres in their writings, demonstrating their linguistic mastery and intellectual wit. Concubines, as part of this cultured environment, would naturally draw upon these established practices to create their own clever verses. You can almost hear the soft chuckle of a scholar, appreciating a particularly clever pun embedded in an ancient text. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might craft a poem where the hidden message wasn't just a word, but a specific date or time, perhaps hinting at a desire for a meeting or referencing a past significant event known only to her and the emperor. Imagine receiving a poem that, when decoded, tells you to meet at the pavilion at midnight on the next full moon. What a truly romantic, and incredibly risky, form of secret communication. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of hidden meanings in concubines' poetry was primarily a display of intellectual prowess and linguistic skill, reflecting the highly sophisticated narrator of classical Chinese literature, or if it was a crucial survival strategy within the perilous harem, allowing women to express agency and desire in a subtle, untraceable manner, protecting them from overt accusations of impropriety. Was it about wit or self-preservation? The debate continues, much like the gentle rustle of a silken scroll, holding secrets whispered between the lines, waiting for a discerning eye to unlock their true, profound meaning. You feel the thrill of intellectual challenge, the silent communication of veiled desire. From the intellectual games of hidden meanings, our journey now explores how concubines anchored their delicate verses in the very rhythm of palace life, seasons and moods, reflecting imperial life. Why? Oh, you might imagine them writing abstractly about love or ambition. But often, the most resonant poems were those that subtly mirrored the specific atmospheric shifts, the changing flora, and the prevailing sentiments that permeated the Forbidden City with each passing season. Imagine a concubine composing a poem about the crisp air and falling leaves of autumn, subtly hinting at her own loneliness as the warmth of imperial favor might wane, or celebrating the vibrant blossoms of spring as a hopeful metaphor for a new beginning. It was less about generic feelings and more about weaving personally motion into the tangible, cyclical experience of imperial life, like a very personal, very elegant nature documentary with an underlying emotional narrative. The highly structured life within the imperial palace meant that the changing seasons brought with them distinct routines, festivals, and emotional resonances. Spring brought renewal and hope, summer heat and languor, autumn introspection and melancholic beauty, and winter solitude and resilience. Concubines, acutely aware of their environment, used these seasonal shifts as powerful backdrops for their poetic expressions. They could describe the precise shade of plum blossoms in the imperial gardens, the specific chill of the winter wind rattling through the palace gates, or the drone of summer cicadas, all while subtly embedding their personal feelings of longing, hope, or quiet despair. This made their poems relatable to the emperor, who shared these seasonal experiences, and allowed for a nuanced expression of inner states. You can almost feel the changing temperatures, the subtle scents carried on the breeze, as each season unfolds within the palace walls. One mainstream historical fact is the deep cultural appreciation for the four seasons, and their symbolic significance in classical Chinese art and literature. Poets frequently use seasonal imagery to evoke moods, philosophical concepts, and the passage of time. This tradition was deeply embedded in the imperial court, where seasonal festivals and changes in imperial attire or diet reinforced the cyclical nature of life. You can almost hear the soft rustle of leaves or the gentle plashing of raindrops, setting the scene for a perfectly crafted verse. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine would deliberately time the presentation of her poem to coincide with a specific seasonal festival or imperial outing, say, the Mid-Autumn Festival with its full moon, or a spring excursion to the imperial gardens. This wasn't just about good timing. It was to ensure her poem's imagery and mood perfectly complemented the emperor's current experience, making it feel particularly poignant and relevant to him. Imagine writing a poem about moonlight, then waiting for the perfect full moon festival to present it, hoping it would resonate with the emperor's festive mood. What a truly strategic way to ride the wave of seasonal sentiment. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of seasonal imagery in concubines' poetry was primarily a reflection of their genuine artistic engagement with the natural world and the cultural conventions of Chinese poetry, or if it was also a highly strategic way to connect with the emperor on a shared, visceral level. subtly reminding him of their shared experience within the palace walls and Evo. King, a deeper, more personal response. Was it about artistic tradition, or emotional resonance? The debate continues, much like the slow, graceful dance of the seasons themselves, each transition brings with it new opportunities for expression, new nuances of unspoken desire, within the vast, unchanging rhythm of imperial life. You feel the subtle pulse of nature, reflected in the intimate verse of a concubine's heart. From the subtle integration of seasonal moods, our journey now explores how concubines might display their talents in less formal, yet equally impactful, settings, artistic salons, informal gatherings. You might imagine a concubine's poetic efforts confined strictly to solitary composition and formal presentation. But within the vast imperial palace, there were often smaller, more intimate gatherings. NGS, perhaps hosted by a favored empress or a high-ranking consort, where concubines could showcase their artistic skills in a seemingly relaxed atmosphere. Imagine attending a quiet tea ceremony in a secluded garden pavilion, where concubines might be encouraged to compose impromptu verses, engage in witty poetic exchanges, or display their calligraphic prowess. It was less about a rigid protocol, and more about a cultivated social stage, like a very exclusive, very refined open mic night for imperial artistry. These informal gatherings offered a crucial opportunity for concubines to gain visibility beyond the highly formalized settings. While still subject to palace rules, these salons allowed for a more spontaneous display of talent and personality. An emperor might occasionally attend such gatherings unannounced, or receive reports about particularly brilliant performances. This offered a chance for concubines to demonstrate not just their learned skills but also their quick wit, adaptability, and charm, qualities that were often more difficult to convey in a strictly formal submission. It was a chance to shine in a way that felt more natural, more personal, potentially forging a deeper connection with imperial observers. You can almost feel the gentle laughter, the polite applause, the subtle buzz of intellectual appreciation in these intimate settings. One mainstream historical fact is the tradition of literary salons and scholarly gatherings that were common in ancient China, particularly among the elite. These gatherings often involved poetry composition, calligraphy practice, and philosophical discussions, providing a vibrant intellectual and artistic environment. The imperial court, being the pinnacle of this culture, naturally replicated traditions within its own confines, adapting them to the specific dynamics of the harem. You can almost hear the soft murmur of learned conversation, punctuated by the occasional exclamation of delight at a particularly clever verse. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might deliberately craft a poem with a playful or slightly humorous tone for these informal settings, something that would be inappropriate for a formal submission but could reveal a charming facet of her personality. Imagine a concubine composing a witty limerick about a palace cat, hoping to elicit a chuckle from the emperor and show her lighter What a truly daring departure from solemn imperial verse. Historians still argue whether the existence of these informal artistic salons within the harem was primarily a genuine attempt to foster cultural enrichment and intellectual exchange among the palace women, reflecting a period's enlightened approach to female education, or if they were also a sophisticated mechanism for the imperial court to assess and identify talented concubines in a seemingly natural setting, subtly managing the competitive environment. Was it about fostering creativity, or efficient talent scouting? The debate continues, much like the gentle clinking of teacups, a soft accompaniment to the quiet display of ambition and artistry, revealing another layer of life within the gilded walls of the Forbidden City. You feel the subtle shift in atmosphere, from rigid formality to cultivated relaxation, all for the purpose of observation and influence. From the cultivated atmosphere of informal salons, our nocturnal journey now confronts a profound pressure that loomed over every concubine's existence, subtly shaping her poetic endeavors. Imperial Emily pressure, producing heirs. You might imagine a concubine's poetic efforts were solely about personal recognition or artistic expression. But for the vast majority, the ultimate goal, the most sec, your path to lasting favor and influence for herself and her family, was to bear a male heir for the emperor. Imagine the weight of this expectation, subtly influencing every verse, every metaphor, as why. Oh, you compose poems that might hint at your fertility, your virtue as a potential mother, or your prayers for a son. It was less about pure art and more about a deeply practical, dynastic imperative, a very elegant, very high-stakes biological advertisement. The continuation of the imperial lineage was the paramount concern of the entire court. A concubine who bore a prince would see her status dramatically elevated, often becoming an empress or a higher king consort, ensuring her own security and immense power for her family. This intense pressure meant that while poetry could open doors, ultimately, the ability to produce a male heir was the most desired outcome. Concubines might subtly weave themes of fertility, robust health, or auspicious blessings for offspring into their poems, or even allude to historical figures known for their virtuous motherhood. Their artistic expressions often became a means to demonstrate their suitability not just as companions, but as mothers of future emperors. You can almost feel the silent, collective yearning for a son, reverberating through the palace walls, influencing every ambitious heart. One mainstream historical fact is the fierce competition among imperial consorts and concubines to bear male children. This competition often led to intrigue, alliances, and desperate measures as on guaranteed power and influence, while barrenness often led to obscurity or even neglect. The emperor's favor was transient, but a son was a permanent link to the imperial line. You can almost hear the whispered prayers and fervent hopes for a male child, a constant undercurrent in the lives of the women in the harem. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine, having already given birth to a male heir, might use her poetry to subtly praise the virtues of her son, or to highlight his intelligence or auspicious nature, even indirectly, to further solidify her own position and ensure the emperor's continued favor for her offspring. Imagine writing a poem about a noble young sapling growing strong, subtly hinting at your own little prince. What a truly clever way to combine maternal pride with political maneuvering. Historians still argue whether the pressure to produce male heirs primarily constrained the artistic freedom of concubines, forcing their poetry into conventional themes of fertility and virtue, or if it also ironically spurred greater creativity, as they sought increasingly subtle and sophisticated ways to convey these messages within the confines of poetic expression. Was it about artistic limitation or innovative adaptation? The debate continues. Much like the gentle rustle of a silken cradle, its emptiness a source of profound anxiety, its fullness a symbol of ultimate triumph, shaping delicate verses composed in hope and ambition. You feel the immense, unspoken burden of dynastic expectation, pressing down on every creative impulse. From the pervasive pressure to produce male heirs, our journey now broadens its scope to how poetry intertwined with other forms of imperial artistry. Beyond words, other artistic talents. You might imagine a concubine's talents confined solely to literary composition. But in the highly cultivated environment of the imperial court, artistic skill was rarely compartmentalized. Concubines often led in a range of artistic disciplines, with poetry serving as a central, unifying thread that could enhance and be enhanced by painting, embroidery, music, and even the ceremonial arts. Imagine a concubine presenting a poem that is not only beautifully written but also accompanied by a delicate painting she created, or a piece of intricate embroidery featuring the very symbols her verse described. It was less about isolated skills and more about a holistic display of refined cultivation, like a Renaissance polymath performing for a very exclusive, very demanding audience. The imperial court valued a well-rounded artistic education. Concubines were often trained in not just poetry and calligraphy, but also painting, especially traditional Chinese landscape or bird NF. Lower painting, embroidery, and various musical instruments. A concubine could use her poetic verses as inspiration for a painting, or she might embroider lines of her own poetry onto a delicate silk fan or garment. This interdisciplinary approach allowed her to showcase the depth of her artistic sensibility and versatility, creating a more profound and memorable impression on the emperor. It demonstrated a mastery of culture that went beyond mere academic recitation, hinting at a truly artistic soul. You can almost feel the smooth texture of silk beneath nimble fingers, the delicate scent of paint, as these various art forms came together in exquisite harmony. One mainstream historical fact is the concept of literati painting in Chinese art history, where painting was not merely a craft but an extension of poetry, calligraphy, and scholarly thought. This tradition held that a true artist-scholar should excel in multiple forms, using them to express their inner world and philosophical insights. Concubines, aspiring to the highest levels of culture, refinement, would naturally embrace this integrated approach, blending their poetic and visual arts. You can almost hear the soft rustle of a brush on paper, its strokes creating images as eloquent as any poem. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, a concubine might even engage in poetic cooking, where she would craft a dish whose ingredients, presentation, or name subtly alluded to a line or theme from a poem she had written, or one that was particularly meaningful to the emperor. Imagine receiving a beautifully prepared dessert, only to realize that its arrangement of fruits subtly spells out a classic poetic phrase. What a truly delicious, and incredibly subtle, way to extend artistic expression beyond the page. Historians still argue whether the integration of poetry with other artistic talents among concubines was primarily a genuine reflection of the holistic approach to art and culture in ancient China, promoting a well-rounded education, or if it was also a strategic necessity within the competitive harem, pushing concubines to develop multiple skills to maximize their chances of catching the emperor's fleeting attention and standing out from their rivals. Was it about artistic flourishing or strategic differentiation? The debate continues, much like the delicate threads of an intricate embroidery. Each stitch a testament to skill, each pattern a silent echo of a verse, weaving together a rich tapestry of talent and ambition in the heart of the palace. You feel the interconnectedness of this beautiful forms, all converging on the silent plea for imperial favor. From the multifaceted display of artistic talents, our journey now touches upon the dangerous precipice that lay hidden beneath every poetic endeavor, whispers of scandal, forbidden verse. You might imagine all poems composed in the harem were expressions of pure devotion or innocent longing. But the intense pressures and jealousies within the imperial court meant that a misstep in verse, a subtle double entendre misinterpreted, or even a seemingly innocent line that displeased the emperor or a powerful rival, could ignite a scandal with devastating consequences. Imagine crafting a beautiful poem, only for it to be twisted into a perceived insult, a political transgression, or a sign of inappropriate affection, leading to your downfall. It was less about artistic freedom and more about navigating a linguistic minefield, where words could become weapons against their own creator. The danger wasn't always intentional rebellion. Sometimes, a concubine, in her desire to impress, might push the boundaries of decorum, perhaps alluding to a sensitive political issue, expressing a persona longing too overtly, or inadvertently echoing a verse associated with a disgraced figure. Other times, a rival might deliberately misinterpret or manipulate a poem's meaning, twisting innocent lines into accusations of impropriety, disloyalty, or even witchcraft. The emperor, constantly vigilant against plots, would be highly sensitive to any perceived slight or hidden challenge, making the composition of poetry a perilous tightrope walk. You can almost feel the silent tension, the constant fear of misinterpretation, hanging heavy in the perfumed air of the palace. One mainstream historical fact is the severity of punishment for perceived disloyalty or transgression within the imperial court, which could range from banishment to the cold palace, forced suicide, or even the execution of a concubine's entire family. This harsh reality meant that every word penned by a concubine carried immense risk, making caution and careful self-censorship paramount. You can almost hear the soft, chilling whisper of a eunuch delivering a decree of punishment, a stark reminder of the fragile nature of imperial favor. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, if a poem was deemed particularly scandalous or offensive, not only would the concubine be punished, but the writing implements themselves, the brush, the inkstone, the paper, might be ritually destroyed, as if they too were imbued with the negative energy of the forbidden verse. Imagine having your entire art kit burned because your last poem caused a stir. What? A truly symbolic, and rather dramatic, form of artistic censorship. Historians still argue whether the extreme risks associated with forbidden verse primarily suppressed artistic innovation and genuine expression among concubines, forcing them into formulaic themes, or if it paradoxically spurred greater creativity, as they learned to master subtlety, double entendre, and veiled symbolism to express themselves safely within strict confines. Was it about stifling creativity, or fostering ingenious circumvention? The debate continues, much like the faint, unsettling echo of a forbidden line, resonating through the cold stone walls of the palace, a stark reminder of the power of words, and the dangers of their misuse, in the high-stakes game of imperial favor. You feel the constant shadow of potential peril, even in the act of artistic creation. From the chilling perils of forbidden verse, our journey now expands to consider the broader, enduring impact of these poetic endeavors. Legacy of poetic concubines, enduring art. You might imagine thousands of poems composed by concubines as mere fleeting expressions of personal ambition, lost to history. But in truth, many of these verses, even if anonymous or attributed differently, contribution rooted to the rich tapestry of Chinese literature, influencing later generations of poets, and offering invaluable insights into life within the imperial harem. Imagine stumbling upon an ancient scroll, its delicate characters whispering tales of longing, resilience, and quiet ambition, penned by a woman whose name might be forgotten but whose art lives on. It was less about individual fame and more about a collective, often unacknowledged, contribution to a timeless literary tradition. While the primary historical records often focused on political events or the emperor's actions, the cultural significance of poetry meant that many verses composed within the harem, even those not directly recognized by the emperor, found their way into private collections, anthologies, or were circulated among literary circles. This ensured their survival, allowing future generations to appreciate their beauty, emotional depth, and historical context. These poems offer unique windows into the interior lives of women confined by imperial protocol, revealing their hopes, frustrations, and remarkable resilience through artistic expression. You can almost feel the quiet reverence of scholars poring over ancient texts, discovering gems of verse that resonate with timeless human experience. One mainstream historical fact is the vastness and enduring nature of the Chinese poetic tradition, spanning thousands of years and encompassing countless poets, both famous and obscure. Works from various periods were meticulously copied, compiled, and studied, creating a continuous literary lineage. Concubines' poetry, even when not explicitly celebrated, often became interwoven into this larger cultural fabric, influencing themes, imagery, and poetic forms. You can almost hear the soft turning of ancient pages, preserving the lyrical voices of the past. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, later poets, particularly male scholars, would borrow themes or even entire lines from poems written by concubines or other palace women, adapting them into their own works, often without attribution. This, while an act of appropriation, also ensured the survival and wider circulation of these verses, albeit in a somewhat disguised form. Imagine your obscure social media post becoming a viral meme, but no one ever knows you were the original creator. What a truly bittersweet form of lasting artistic influence. Historians still argue whether the lasting legacy of concubines' poetry primarily demonstrates the inherent power of art to transcend social confines and personal circumstances, allowing women to leave an indelible mark on culture despite their restricted lives, or if it also highlights the systemic erasure and appropriation of female voices within a patriarchal literary tradition, where their contributions were often absorbed or anonymized. Was it about artistic triumph, or historical marginalization? The debate continues, much like the gentle whisper of a timeless verse, carried on the winds of centuries, its beauty and emotional depth enduring, even if its original author remains a quiet mystery. You feel the profound resonance of these voices from the past, their art a testament to the enduring spirit. From the enduring legacy of artistic contributions, our journey now brings us to the present day, revealing how the historical role of artistic expression in power dynamics still resonates. Modern ec. Oh yes, creativity and influence. You might imagine the subtle strategies employed by concubines to gain favor through poetry are confined to dusty history books, irrelevant in our contemporary world of social media and public relations. But the fundamental human impulse to use creativity, whether through words, images, or carefully crafted narratives, to influence, persuade, and gain favor remains strikingly similar, even if the tools have changed dramatically. Imagine a modern public figure, carefully curating their social media presence, crafting compelling speeches, or commissioning artistic RKS to project a specific image and gain public approval. It's less about quill and silk, and more about algorithms and viral content, yet the core desire to influence through art remains the same. The ancient practice of concubines using poetry to appeal to an emperor's intellect and emotions laid bare a timeless truth. Art has always been a powerful medium for influence. In today's world, this translates into myriad forms: politicians hiring speechwriters to craft resonant messages, celebrities using carefully curated social media posts to connect with fans, or brands employing sophisticated advertising campaigns that blend artistry with persuasion. The favor sought might be votes, endorsements, or public opinion, but the underlying mechanism, using creative expression to forge a action and sway perception, is a direct echo of those ancient courtly maneuvers. The competitive landscape might be digital, but the human desire to stand out and gain influence through crafted communication is a profound continuity. You can almost feel the invisible threads connecting a concubine's carefully penned verse to a modern influencer's meticulously designed online persona. One mainstream historical fact is the increasing prominence of soft power in international relations, where a nation's cultural and artistic influence is used to enhance its appeal and achieve foreign policy objectives. This is a direct, large-scale extension of the idea that artistic and cultural refinement can win favor and build connections, just as a concubine's poem aimed to win the emperor's heart. You can almost hear the subtle hum of cultural exchange, a modern symphony of influence played across global stages. Now for a quirky tidbit: sometimes, a public figure today might leak a seemingly personal, artistically inclined piece of work, a poem, a painting, a song, to the media, hoping it will be perceived as a genuine, vulnerable expression of their inner self, thereby garnering public sympathy or admiration. This subtle PR tactic is a direct descendant of the concubine's strategies to reveal a deeper, or appealing aspect of their personality through art. Imagine a pop star's spontaneous, acoustic performance going viral, subtly orchestrated to showcase their raw talent and authenticity. What? A truly modern, yet historically rooted, form of calculated intimacy. Historians still argue whether the modern reliance on curated artistic expression for influence primarily represents a genuine desire for authenticity and connection between leaders and the public, reflecting a more democratic and transparent society, or if it is merely a more sophisticated and pervasive form of manipulation, a contemporary gilded cage where carefully constructed images replace no in substance. Was it about fostering real connection, or perfecting the illusion of it? The debate continues, much like the gentle flicker of a screen in the quiet of your room, reflecting images and words carefully designed to influence, to sway, to leave a lasting impression, a quiet echo of the ancient, artistic ambitions that unfolded within the walls of the Forbidden City. You feel the enduring power of creativity, shaping perception from the most intimate court to the vast global stage. And so, as the final verses of our journey fade, you can feel the air around you growing softer, the vibrant tapestry of ancient court life gently dissolving. We've delved into the remarkable world Our concubines, confined by the rigid walls of the imperial harem, found their voice and their power in the delicate art of poetry. You've seen how their ambition, their education, their subtle use of symbolism, and their navigating of perilous rivalries all centered around the creation of verses designed to capture the attention of a single, powerful man. Let the whispers of those bygone palaces, the imagined rustle of silk, and the faint scent of ink and aged paper softly recede. The world of imperial influence, with all its intricate artistic maneuvers and profound human drama, is now gently merging with the comforting quiet of your own space. There's no need to cling to the intricate details of acrostics, or the subtle dangers of hidden meanings. Just let the gentle hum of history, a soothing presence in the quiet darkness, wash over you. May your thoughts be peaceful, your dreams be deep, and your rest be undisturbed. Sleep well.